Welcome to The Outlet, an NBA podcast hosted by Nick Fay and Kory Waldron.
On this episode of The Outlet, Kory and I are joined by Jac Manuell to discuss our top 25 unrestricted free agents. On this specific show, we focus on free agents 25 through 21, but as always, you can catch us on all streaming platforms. Enjoy the show. But guys, kick things off. On our list, we have number 25, Carmelo Anthony.
The most disrespected superstar by the Denver Nuggets now let's focusing on Carmelo Anthony overall. We've obviously been doing bylines. We've been chatting about this for about a week. A lot of prep's gone into this. I think Melo was on the fringes. We literally discussed just beforehand that we could have him a spot or two higher. I think he was awesome for the Portland Trail Blazers. I think that his defense was probably the best defense we've seen him play for maybe a year or two, at least before the OKC days. He was really, really good, at least putting effort on that end. He's always been a good rebounder. He hit some timely shots. I think he's going to be back in Portland no matter what. And if not some of the team, he's going to be a fringe starter. His vet minimum is already quite high, so I don't necessarily expect him to get more than that. But I think Portland have seen what they can get out of him. And you now add in a Trevor Ariza with that, and he's sort of like a backup, and you have some more depth at the wing spot. I think he's going to be back in Portland. I think he's going to be adding value yet again.
Yeah, I mean, we thought Melo, majority of us as a collective, myself probably included, thought Melo was washed before last season. Obviously got run time by a Portland Trail Blazers team that was desperate for offense, and Melo was able to provide 15 points per game. As you mentioned it, this was slim Melo, right? We've had hoodie Melo. We've had all these different iterations of Melo. This was slim Melo. He was definitely in great shape, which I think helped him, as you mentioned, Jack, be better on defense. And then we saw offensively he can still hit threes. He can still beat you in the mid-range. He can still score in a variety of ways. Obviously not to the same level as when he was a superstar, but he's still a top-notch scorer in this league. And yeah, I mean, I think Portland makes the most sense. Obviously, Portland was dying to get Melo when he was in his prime. They missed out on him in that point of his career, but it feels like he wants to be there now with Lillard and McCollum. And unless some other team blows him out of the water with some sort of massive contract or a bigger contract, he probably ends up in Portland with a similar role. Even though I do think he's more likely to be a sixth man this upcoming year than a starter once again.
Yeah, I think the thing with Melo, Kory, you mentioned kind of some people thought he was washed. I don't think it was even as much as him being washed as him not accepting the role that he was in this portion of his career. He still wanted to be the star. He still wanted to put up points. But in Portland, he kind of found that perfect role next to Dame and CJ. And like you guys mentioned, I thought defensively he saw some nice strides. Never going to be a great defender, just doesn't have the lateral quickness, obviously, at this point in his career. But that offensive pop, that three-point shooting, that clutch ability, definitely something you could see in what he could add. And I think the only reason he's probably at 25 is because he doesn't necessarily fit with all teams. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like Melo can be a plug-and-play guy. He has to be in that perfect type of role, which I just kind of mentioned. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone else can kind of get him away from Portland. But like you said, Kory, I think he'll end up in Portland. Maybe the Lakers can make an attempt at him. Maybe the Brooklyn Nets. I think it would have to be a team that has some major star power, like a dynamic duo, so he can really play that third wheel.
Yeah, it's probably the best fit for Melo. You don't want Melo to be, honestly, he was probably in too high of an offensive needed role for the Blazers. You probably want him to be like your fourth or fifth best offensive player. And maybe not, fourth might even be pushing it at this point.
Like you said, sixth man I think is really the best bet for him at this point in his career, given that he's not going to have it every night and his offense just isn't amazing. So going against bench guys, I think it'll be a little easier for him moving forward.
Yeah.
But what would you guys say would be the highest spot he could be? Obviously, we had him at 25. I mentioned he probably could be higher on certain teams. What do you think would be the highest ceiling in terms of ranking that you would put him at?
Looking at our list, I would go 22, and we'll obviously get to some of those names, and people can make their judgments when they see the article and listen to the podcast and watch us on YouTube. But I think 22, I mean here from 22 to 25 is sort of a range. Looking over this and sort of we've sort of gone back and forth and changed some names around. I think 22 is probably the highest that it could go.
Yeah, looking at the list, between 22 21, they'd probably be the highest I would put them. Again, I think when we go through the names ahead of them, I think they add more all-around value to a team probably than Melo does at this point of his career.
Yeah, I think with just a fit, like I said, there's just so many spots where you're not sure how it would work out. I would probably say maybe fringe 20. Maybe you could push him up there if he's having one of those nights. I also think we have maybe a little bit of bias because we just saw him play in the bubble, and I feel like he played better in the bubble than he did during the entire regular season. He just kind of upped his game a little bit. But moving on to our next guy, we got Jordan Clarkson at number 24. Thoughts on him and his game? He really bounced back in Utah.
Yeah, I thought that his value that he provided to Utah was really important because they were, Mike Conley was off having his kid, and the rotation shrunk, and he was forced to sort of step up into a bigger role. And I thought that he really did produce. He sort of has realized his niche now is a sort of flamethrower scorer in terms of his efficiency. Get out there, get his shots off, and be efficient in the way that he does it. Lou Williams, these sort of guys. And while they might not be the best on the other end of the floor, there is value for those guys, especially off the bench. It wouldn't surprise me if we see next season the Utah Jazz have a really nice run. Jordan Clarkson's coming off the bench, pinch hitting whenever there's some injuries to that backcourt every now and then. And he, is in contention for Sixth Man of the Year. I think he has that talent. I think he is a good enough scorer to do that, and he could be in that range. And it's going to be interesting to see what the compensation is for him this offseason. But I do think that he's going to get something, even though the market obviously is going to be a lot more shallow, and with the money obviously up in the air with the nature of the salary cap.
Yeah, I mean, I would say he's got 6 Man of the Year type potential if he's going to be able to provide this sort of offense off the bench. Obviously, shooting split wise, 46% from the field, 36% from three with the Jazz. As you mentioned, with Mike Conley missing some time, without Bojan Bogdanovic even, or the Jazz, they were able to rely on Jordan Clarkson to be that flamethrower off the bench, to provide offense, can get to the rim, has a solid jump shot. Obviously, you'd probably like to see more defense, a little bit more playmaking. But in terms of what he brings to a team, it's offense. And obviously, that Jazz team, they really needed offense. Clarkson was that option. And I think Clarkson, being the type of player he's been throughout his career, he's a guy who just scores. That's what he's going to be brought in to do. And if a team's looking for, 10 to 15 points per game, Jordan Clarkson can definitely provide that.
Yeah, 6-man role is perfect for him. He obviously, did his best in Utah. I don't think he ever played at this level before, so I think that's probably why he's a little bit lower on our list. But he easily could be a guy that I think would boost up maybe even to 15, just given how he can really pop off and be that 6-man type. But like you said, Cory, defense not really there. I think shot selection at time is very questionable, where if he continues to improve in that area. And then he's still relatively young, so I think there's some more skill he can add to his game and just kind of refine things and get a little bit better. And defensively, it's just more putting in that effort and showcasing it. I don't think he's a guy you want necessarily starting on your team, but if he's coming off the bench in that role which he knows what he has to do and just put up 15 a night, I think you feel really good about Clarkson.
Yeah, for sure.
You guys think he's staying in Utah? Obviously, we'll talk about where guys are going to land closer to when free agency actually starts. But any teams in mind right now?
I think Utah's probably the perfect destination for it because it also you mentioned his defense a bit more in depth there, Nick. Quinn Snyder gets the most out of you defensively, no matter how good or bad you are as a defender. Whether it's hiding you, whether it's putting you in the right lineups. We didn't necessarily say, Jordan Clarkson is absolute sieve right now, in the same way that Lou Williams was for the Clippers and Montrezl Harrell was for the Clippers. Yeah. So obviously that is, a heap of credit goes to Quinn Snyder for that. So I think that he has, at least from all the information that I've sort of been reading, it would surprise me if he goes anywhere but Utah. But there'll be the teams that with space as well. The Atlantas, the Detroits, the Charlottes. Do they really want to throw money at these sort of guys when they've already probably got a lot of their backcourt sort of sorted, or a lot of it is their backcourt is a little bit younger and developing? Yeah. So to me, it makes a lot of sense that he probably sticks around in Utah.
Yeah, I think he only really makes sense for a contending or playoff team to solidify your bench. It doesn't make sense for, like you said, Atlanta, New York, or any of those teams to just kind of throw money at him, because he's not necessarily going to raise your floor that high. He might add to your ceiling a little bit, just giving you that extra bench boost, but not a guy that I think teams are going crazy over. Utah makes the most sense, not only for the Jazz, but also for Clarkson, because that was the best stretch of his career.
Yeah, 100%.
So moving on to our next guy, Dwight Howard. Obviously, Dwight just played in the finals with the Lakers. They picked up the dub. He had some good moments. He had some bad moments. But at 23, what were you guys thinking putting him here?
Batman. No, that's all right. I thought Dwight Howard provided spurts.
Yeah.
And I think at this point of his career, I think he has a greater acceptance of what his role is in the NBA going forward. Similar to a Carmelo Anthony. I think Melo has a bit more awareness, but I also do think that Portland were able to give him more opportunities than LA were, because, LA did start to realize, you know what, Dwight's probably a more physical defensive presence than JaVale McGee. Let's throw him on the joker here. And in obviously Game 6 when Caruso took his place in the starting lineup, Dwight didn't see any minutes, but it got him a chip. And when it gets you a championship ring at the end of the day, that's all that necessarily matters. But we've heard recent rumors of Golden State being interested in him. That would be pretty crazy for a team of Steve Kerr, who actually, it wouldn't be surprising because Steve Kerr loves these sort of token centers. Anderson Varejao, Andrew Bogut was pretty decent for some certain points. Festus Ezeli,
JaVale McGee.
Dwight Howard. JaVale McGee, exactly. It would make a lot of sense that maybe Dwight Howard fits there. It's sort of like, a starting sort of center. And maybe he does make his way there to sort of imagine he is part of a championship-winning team in Golden State and the Lakers. That would be absolutely wild. What a storyline.
Yeah, I mean, Dwight Howard, has shown that, he's also in the best shape he's been in probably in a few years. Obviously, that was like the first biggest thing for Dwight Howard this year. And healthy, of course. And I think, depending on the role, he can still provide probably a double-double because around the rim, he can still dunk. He's still a decent rebounder, especially in this better shape he's in. He can provide some rim protection. We definitely saw the flaws of Dwight Howard, especially in that Miami Heat NBA Finals. He likes to be physical. That can be a detriment at times. And also his limited ability offensively isn't great when you don't have a good floor spacing team, which is why a team like the Warriors makes so much sense, because if you have all those guys who can space the floor, that's when Dwight Howard's probably at his best at this point of his career. But yeah, I mean, Dwight's still a very consistent guy. And now, like Jack has mentioned, because he has adopted and refixed his mindset and understands that he is not, the 2009 Orlando Magic Dwight Howard that he once was, not even the Lakers version of 2012. He is past his prime and now has to do the dirty things to be an effective NBA player. I think that acceptance has been the most crucial part. He's definitely going to be a positive for whatever team he goes to, because I think the times of him bouncing around like the Hornets and the Hawks, he's not going to be on a shit team next year. I think he's still going to be around a team that's playing for something.
Yeah, I think, Jack, you nailed it when you said he plays well in spurts. I think moving to the bench was so great for him, and playing smaller minutes allowed him to be like fully energized and use the best of his ability. Because like you said, Cory, he's doing a lot of the dirty work and understanding where he can have an impact on the game. In the clip we're showing right now, you're seeing him set a ton of screens, rolling to the rim, getting easy dunks, putbacks, and that's really something he wasn't necessarily doing a ton in Houston. And that was one of the reasons him and James Harden didn't get along, is because Dwight wanted to post up every play and didn't want to run pick and roll. Now he understands, hey, if I'm going to stay in the NBA, I need to send a lot of picks, I need to rebound, I need to do the dirty work. And I think some of the antics can go a little too far, like we saw get some techs against Denver, and he tried to work Jokic. It worked some of the time, but I think Dwight in a bench role, or even just like a small role, because I feel like if you start for the Warriors at center, you're essentially playing bench minutes and like 25 a game or whatever it might be. But he'd be great. He'd be great because he'd give him that vertical spacing in terms of the oops, and he's also, like I just said, he set some really good screens for LA. Now just imagine if you had Steph and Clay coming off those screens. I think that'd be a good fit. So LA obviously wants to keep him because I think he played really well. He has a nice fit next to LeBron and AD. But I could see other teams going after him, and they don't necessarily have to offer a ton. I think Dwight could be had for probably the mini MLE, the taxpayer mid-level exception. So, but any other thoughts on Dwight?
Kudos. I'm glad Dwight Howard's a relevant NBA player again. Because again, you think about this, before last season, or even at the start, he wasn't on a team. The only reason he got a job is because DeMarcus Cousins got hurt once again, and the Lakers had a roster spot. There wasn't a sure path for there to be a Dwight Howard in the NBA last season, and I'm glad that because he had such a good redemption season that we're going to see Dwight Howard probably for another couple of years.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, too, not only just on the floor, I think there was a lot of locker room issues, at least in Atlanta and Charlotte, so he cleaned that up. Obviously, LA had a great locker room this year, but moving to 20...
I was just going to say, did you guys hear the story that Jared Dudley recounted of when they were in Atlanta? Dwight Howard's like to Duds, he's like, yo, you want to come see my snake collection? I'm just like, I can imagine Dwight Howard saying that, and he's like, oh, you want to come to... I don't know, where's Six Flags? You guys would know that. What state's that in?
It's all over.
They're all over. It's like a, yeah.
It's like a theme
he's
park
just like,
yeah.
And he wanted to go there. He's just like, no, Dwight, I don't want to go to the Six Flags with you. I'm just like, yeah. I mean, look, we're all little kids at heart here. Yeah. So I think that it's crazy, like sort of Cory was saying, how quickly things can change. In the space of 12 months, in the space of 5, 6, 7 years when he was back in LA as well. Now that he's sort of reformed his image and he's now a championship-winning LA Laker. It's crazy to say, but the storylines of the NBA are what make us love it.
Yeah. Now moving on over to 22, we got Cory's boy Justin Holliday coming in. What did you guys think about putting him at 22?
I'll start this one off. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay, we'll go.
Justin Holliday had a career year for the Indiana Pacers, and he's been a guy who's bounced around a lot. He's a 3-and-D wing. Now, obviously, he's a little bit smaller, probably a 2-3. You can't really play him at a small ball 4, but he provides good defense. He is low maintenance. The 3-point shot, shooting 39% on, 4 attempts is really good. Obviously, the Pacers weren't a high-volume 3-point offense. They were dead last at 3-pointers attempted. So you have to think in a bench role for, the Pacers or for another team, he can provide you some defense, can provide you some floor spacing. Justin Holiday's pretty much, I think, one of the guys that every contender who's looking for a wing is going to be looking at because he just fits the mold. I hope the Pacers keep him, of course, but I could definitely see another team offering him, a mid-level exception and him probably getting scooped up, or maybe even, $5 to $6 million. I don't think he's going to be much more than that, though.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't hate having him on the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets need some defense and some 3-point shooting. Whether it's in the backcourt or frontcourt. I don't think Sean Marks is picky in that sort of regard. But yeah, I think that I'd like to see him under a Mike D'Antoni, a more modern coach, and sort of those 4 3-point shot attempts goes like to 8.
Wait a minute, pause. We don't know if Mike D'Antoni's going to the Pacers yet, but yes.
Hey, I said if, or he could be under Mike D'Antoni in Brooklyn as an assistant coach under Steve Nash as well. So that he might get to be under D'Antoni either way. But yeah, I think Cory summed it up there. He knows Justin Holliday probably better than all of us on this podcast, and many of other podcasters and anyone on NBA Twitter for that regard as well. I just think that in general, I think he is a prototypical guy that you need as a role player. You look at the previous championship iterations of teams. You look at like a KCP, Avery Bradley really contributed in the regular season for the Lakers. You look at the guys in the Miami Heat, Jay Crowders, these sort of types. You just need guys to fill in with some defense and 3-point shooting. You guys that don't need possessions and can just sit out on the wing, sit out on the perimeter, while guys like Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, Domantas Sabonis, Victor Oladipo, these guys do their work, and these guys, feast on everything else, do the offensive boards, do the gritty little things that create team success and team culture.
Agreed. I think he's a guy, the reason that he's at 22, and he might not be as talented as Carmelo Anthony or Jordan Clarkson, but he's a guy that's plug and play. Like you guys mentioned, he can fit on so many different playoff teams in that bench role, give you some defense, give you that 3-point shooting. You don't have to worry about getting him shots. He's going to do his job every single night. So not necessarily like the most glamorous signing or free agent, but just a guy that could help you win games. And I think that any type of playoff team would be happy to have on their bench.
Yeah.
Where other spots do you think he could land other than Indiana? Is there any places that pop in mind?
I mean, I think depending on what the Clippers do with their bench, I could see him kind of fitting in. If they decide, like, let's say they don't want Marcus Morris back, I think Justin Holliday would be a fine replacement for a guy like Marcus Morris, and you probably don't have the headache of Marcus Morris. Looking at other contenders, I could see maybe even the Dallas Mavericks. Maybe they're looking for some wing defense to add to their team and some 3-point shooting because, of course, around Luka Doncic, you want to have spacing, and Justin Holliday could provide that for them as well. So those are like the 2 places that pop up in my head right off the bat. But I don't know. What about you guys?
I'll advocate for the Brooklyn Nets. I did a little bit just then because the Nets need, and they have this small amount of space depending on what they do with certain guys in their roster. But the Nets need defense badly, and Justin Holliday, he's not necessarily Marcus Smart, but at the very least, he provides some above average level of skills on that end of the floor. And he can hit the 3 ball at a more than respectable rate. And I think that, under Steve Nash, he'll be taken, if he were to be a Brooklyn Net, in the future, we're in the black and white or the blue, white and red nowadays, he would certainly provide a lot of value as a role player next to Kyrie, KD, Karras, these sort of guys. And I think he would provide immense value just as his presence there because you look at KCP, he was the 3rd best player on a championship team. Not saying that could be Justin Holliday, and KCP obviously will probably be on this list a little bit later in the episode and a little bit later on. But 3-and-D wing guys, no matter if they're in the backcourt or the front court or on wings or on 1s, 2s or 3s or 4s, that they just add value and they are so damn important. Probably more important than the guys that we sort of talked about that have more pronounced defensive weaknesses like Jordan Clarkson, Carmelo Anthony, because you can't necessarily, like Nick alluded to, plug and play them as much. You almost have to fit them in according to their weaknesses, if anything.
Yeah, I agree, Jack. I think almost any team that has, a contending or only has maybe the taxpayer MLE, because I don't think you have to spend a ton of money to get Justin Holliday. If you offer him that $5 million contract for, 2 or 3 years, that might be enough to get it done. 5 per year, obviously. And he would just be able to be a guy on the floor that you can count on to play defense, at least at a competent level, and give you that three-point shooting and not need touches to drive. And I feel like at his best, that's where you want him. You don't want him trying to create for others or create for himself. You want to just give him some shots where he's in motion, or it's just an easy jumper for him to hit and just make some of those hustle plays on the other end of the floor.
Yeah, for sure.
But moving on from there, we got Aron Baynes at number 21. It's an interesting guy. He had some great moments with the Suns this year, and his first real chance, I guess, to start and be somewhat of a focal point, because in Boston he was more of that dirty work guy, but early in the season with Phoenix, he really had some big games for them.
Yeah, we need to give him the kudos he deserves so we can get the prop up from the Aron Baynes fan account, so we can get some nice retweets from those guys. And also, my Aussie brethren, he's going to lead us to gold in 2021 at the Tokyo Olympics, no doubt about that, especially if half of the American lads aren't going to be even showing up. So don't worry about that. We got this tied up. In saying that, I think Aron Baynes...
trash talk.
Hey, you have an international man who has been known to trash talk on a podcast. It is going to happen. But Aron Baynes, I think, in terms of him and the game that he produced this year, he was starting for the Phoenix Suns and providing immense value on both ends of the floor. His three-point shooting has just been a revelation, a la Brook Lopez style in a lot of ways. And he was playing better than the number one pick that the Phoenix Suns selected in DeAndre Ayton for a lot of periods. Obviously, Ayton was awesome in Orlando, and I think he certainly solidified himself as being more than just, a guy coming off the bench. But Aron Baynes, for a lot of teams that are looking for a center that can, plug and play, to sort of steal Nick's words, you could certainly do worse. I think he's a good defender as well. And I know you guys have given him a lot of trash in the past, but it's full circle now. Maybe not full circle.
He's gotten a lot better, though. I'll give him credit. Like, he's definitely not the same player he was 3 years ago. Like, his transition from Boston and on has been crazy. Like, Brad Stevens definitely helped him take his game to the next level. And like you said, Jack, the add of three-point shooting completely changed who he was as a player.
To quote the King LeBron James, he wants his damn respect too.
Yeah, I mean, he shot 35% from three this year. Obviously, DeAndre Ayton gets suspended for those 25 games to start the year off because of the performance-enhancing drugs. Aron Baynes stepped right into that role and played fantastic. And obviously, Baines can provide some veteranship. He's been a part of some pretty good teams now. He's with those Spurs team that ended up winning a title, in 2013, 2014. The Celtics obviously were a very good team. So he's a guy who obviously can provide some offense and floor spacing now, which you wouldn't be able to say 3 years ago. Provides decent rebounding. Defensively, he's nothing special. But again, he's a physical body. And that's something that I think a lot of contenders will be interested in looking at, because he can provide the dirty things while also now spacing the floor, which is so critical at the center position.
Yeah, I think the three-point shooting is so huge, because without that, he really wasn't giving you much offensively, because he's not a vertical threat. He's not a guy that's going to go up and catch those oops or that three-point shot, with his ability to set maybe some of the best screens in the entire NBA. Like, he's just a huge human, so he's going to open up space for anybody.
Put some respect on his name and this accent. The accent. Put some respect on my damn country, Nick. Not just my name. I mean, Rob Pelinka wants his respect. He doesn't deserve it. Australia deserves their respect.
Yeah, they do, Jack. Especially you. But moving on to number 20.